My background in physical therapy, I was trained at WashU here in St. Louis, and we are really big on the human movement system. And so, what we like to look at is it's not about it's not about what movement you're doing, it's how you're doing it. And so, sometimes I'll have people come into me, like you just said, like, oh, I run every day, it hurts, I just can't run. And it's like, no,
Mhm.
you just can't run like that.
Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to Shits Trainers Say, a regular podcast brought to you by Catalyst Personal Training. And today I have Danielle Ivie. She is the president, CEO, founder, head trainer over at Powered by Movement. And they are located inside of CrossFit St. Louis. They are not affiliated. They're independent of CrossFit, but I'm sure it's a great source of patience for them. And she focuses on movement, and then they do performance screens, various performance screens, depending on what's going on with you and what you would like to do. She was a gymnast in high school, so she knows about injuries, I'm sure. And she has a PhD in physical therapy. So, Danielle, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be
Yeah,
here.
did I forget anything in that intro?
I don't think so. You got it covered.
Okay.
Yeah, grew up in Southern
Okay.
California, moved to Arizona, and then made my way to St. Louis. If you would have asked me when I was 17 if I'd live in St. Louis, I would have said nope. But here I am, and I love it.
Yeah, I think you should go back to Southern California personally, if you're asking me. There's a lot less people there now, so it might be a little bit cheaper. But
Right, maybe.
so we're going to talk about today, what Danielle is going to be talking about is movement, the importance of movement, especially given what we've gone through the past year. I think there are certain portions of the population that have moved this the least amount of movement they had in their entire life, because of COVID and the lockdowns and working from home and things like that. And then that brings about injuries, it brings about discomfort, it brings about a lot of issues. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So, Danielle, what are some of the most common things that you have seen coming into your office as of late?
Yeah, so specifically related to working from home, like you just talked about, I think COVID has really taken a toll on a lot of us. We just don't move as much as we used to. And whether that's just getting up and moving around the office, going to a different building for meetings, people are just sitting in one spot all day long, not moving. So, related to that, a lot of the things I'm seeing are some like neck and shoulder pain and low back pain, just from being sedentary, being on your computer, and not realizing how little you're moving throughout the day. And so, for us, depending on the patient, of course, there's specific reasons why they have their pain problems going on, but we really like to number one, just make sure that our clients are moving and that myself included, we want to look at the full spectrum. So we want you moving when you're young and spry, and we want you moving when you're 85 years old, right? And so I think that's really the key. Even specificity aside, just keep moving.
Absolutely. Yeah, that range of motion. So key. Pain-free range of motion. So you talked about people working from home and kind of being sedentary. What about the people who say, well, I run every day, I walk every day, and I get out and I move every day. But if they're moving kind of in that same pattern, what that can set them up
Yeah,
for.
definitely. So, my background in physical therapy, I was trained at WashU here in St. Louis, and we are really big on the human movement system. And so, what we like to look at is it's not about what movement you're doing, it's how you're doing it. And so, sometimes I'll have people come into me, like you just said, like, oh, I run every day, it hurts, I just can't run. And it's like, no, you just can't run like that. So it's a matter of how are you doing that movement, and our bodies are quite frankly lazy. Like we just love to save
Mhm,
energy. It's
mhm.
survival, right? So our bodies don't think about moving efficiently until we tell them to. And so
Mhm.
my favorite thing to do and what I've been trained to do, and help people figure out is you can still do those activities you love. We just might have to train your body to move in a different way so that it feels better. And it's less about conserving like every ounce of energy necessarily, but more about moving in a way that protects your muscles, protects your joints, and gives you the ability to reach those performance goals or just go for a jog every day and not have pain. And so I really dive into the specifics of checking out how they move, analyzing it, teaching, educating them on why it's causing their pain, and then giving them the tools so that they can fix it, they can be independent, and they can do it lifelong.
Yeah. I agree. I can't agree with you more on that. And when you're talking about moving, like running that way, and your body being lazy, I agree with that, because when you have people that work from home or seated all day, I know now that I do a lot more administrative stuff, that I've never had more neck and low back pain in my life.
Right.
And I've been active my whole life. But if you're looking at your body from the side, if you're like this all day, kind of
Mhm.
crouched over a desk, then your body gets lazy. It's like, oh, this is
Right.
what we're going to do it. So you kind of reinforce that posture, and it gets harder and harder. This range of motion here becomes more and more limited, correct? And the
Absolutely.
same thing if all you do is run in a straight line, when you have to move side to side or diagonal, like if you're slipping and trying to keep yourself from falling on ice, then
Yeah.
you're not as strong and don't have as much mobility. And then that's how injuries occur, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's a good point you bring up, is almost like the lack of variability. So I think that in the training world, fitness world, PT world, there's always like, oh, good posture, bad posture. And my thing with my clients is I always tell them, like, there's not anything that is a good or bad posture. I was like, the only good posture is the one that is always changing. So I think that variability is key. And especially with working from home and such, we go into this one position all the time, staring at our computer, and we never switch it up. So then when you go for a run or try to change that up, your body doesn't love it.
Exactly. Yeah, because it gets set, like you said, it gets
Mhm.
lazy. You know,
Mhm.
it's not a machine. I tell people all the time, it's not a machine. It's an
Right.
adaptive organism. It will adapt to whatever you throw at it or whatever you don't throw at it. So, and then the next thing I want to cover with you is, and this is one of my pet peeves, like say somebody gets an injury, say they injure their knee,
Mhm.
sprain ligament, something along those lines. Should they continue to train?
Absolutely. I think that the similar, I guess it's similar whether you're a high level athlete or whether you're working from home. The worst posture is the one that's not moving, right? So,
Mhm.
our big thing, and I think this is what sometimes, quite frankly, a lot of physical therapists will miss, is that just because you have an injury in one area of your body doesn't mean you can keep the rest of you strong. And there's a lot of ways to modify, to move, to keep going. Um, why lose everything if you don't have to, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And because I've had, my fair share of injuries, and I'm sure you have too.
Yeah,
And after the initial disappointment, I try to focus on the positive, what I can do, and maybe it's an opportunity for me to try something new. And then the other thing too that I get is that when clients come in, they say, "Oh, I have this shoulder problem, so I don't want to do any shoulders." So their answer is to avoid it,
right.
avoid moving it at all. Is that the right answer?
No, no, it's not. And I think that that goes back to saying it's not what you're doing, it's how you're doing it, right? Like your
Hmm.
shoulder's hurting because maybe you're pressing without using the right muscles. And so it's not feeling good. And once we teach you to get things going, they could probably press that same day without any pain. I think it's just a matter of working. And that's kind of why I like this interdisciplinary model. So, like, as a personal trainer and physical therapist, it's like I tell them a movement so they can keep going with you and you keep them going. It's strong. And so, um, I think it probably stems from previous research in years past where we didn't know what was best for injury, and we didn't know that movement and like low graded exercise was actually better for tissue healing. And I think a lot of those things, like anything else, like our grandmas and our moms told us, they kind of stick with us. And so I think people don't realize that it's safe to move. We just have to remind your body it's safe and we can keep going.
Yeah, some of those old wives' tales that are
Mhm.
myths still. Like, if women lift, they'll get bulky. If
Right.
you strength train, you'll get stiff. You won't be flexible. All of those things. And like you said, it comes down to specificity of training and movement. So I agree with you there. And the other thing that I always get a kick out of is, and I'll just take knees for an example. Like say if they, sprain, their medial, collateral ligament,
Right.
then they say, oh, I can't move it. I had a client who had knee replacement, and how soon they had him up and walking on his knee replacement?
Like 12 minutes, probably.
The same day. I mean, he just got a new knee literally hammered into his bone, and they have
Right.
him walking the same day. And why do they have him walking? Because one of the best modes of recovery and healing is movement, because it increases
Absolutely.
blood flow, increases healing, make sure you maintain the range of motion. So it's the same thing when you have an injury, but you have to do it smartly. So for me, smartly means a team approach, or like you said, an interdisciplinary approach. So if you're treating a client, him or her, for a knee sprain, then I'm going to check with you to see what you're doing, what your approach is, and also go over a checklist of moves I should or should not do. Do you think that's a good approach?
Yeah, that is my favorite thing to do. So whenever I have a patient or client that works with like a strength coach, personal trainer, athletic trainer, anyone like that, my first thing is to get their phone number, get the patient's consent to talk to them, and make sure we're on the same page, because there are a lot of tools in your toolbox that are better served for the client than I can provide them, and same for me. So I think there's no reason not to work together. And kind of back on what we were saying before, if we sit here and say, oh, you can't do anything, then how is that athlete or that person going to get back to the activities they love, when not only has their quad maybe and their hamstrings gotten a little weaker, but so have their lats and their rotator cuff and their lower abdominals? And so I think there's a lot of things to be said about working together and keeping people moving and making sure that, I know my expertise is, okay, this tissue's healing. We want to offload this, but everything else, go for it and
It's
have
good to go.
a good time.
Awesome. Okay, great. And then I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that you do some performance screens. Can you
Yeah.
tell the listeners what type of screens you do?
Absolutely, yeah. So one of the big reasons I started my own practice and got into PT, I was a gymnast since I was 7 years old, all the way through college. Long time, a lot of injuries, a lot of training when you're young, when you're in gymnastics. So one of my big passions is just making sure that we not only have a reactive response to injury, but a proactive response. So why my thoughts when I came to PT school, like, where were the people telling me how to move when I was a 10-year-old gymnast? Or where were the people telling my husband to move when he was playing baseball at 14? And so my big approach too is to not only help people recover from injury and get back to the activities they love, but also give them an opportunity to assess their movement on an annual or quarterly basis, or even season, like preseason, postseason, to make sure that you are moving well, and that if there's any discrepancies we see that could affect your performance, we give you the tools you need to kind of strengthen those areas and make sure you don't have a weak spot or a weak link in your performance that can, one, make you
Mhm.
play better, and then two, hopefully reduce the risk of an injury so that we're not in the reactive phase. And
Mhm.
so what those look like is anywhere from general to specific. So we have like an annual wellness screen where it's kind of like we relate it to what a physical would be with your primary care physician, but it's more about
Mhm.
just like your movement. How are you moving? How strong are you? How's your range of motion? Any like aches and pains, things like that. We check in with you on a yearly basis and then give you kind of a little program to work on to make sure you just, I kind of also compare it sometimes like getting an oil change in your car, right? Make sure you're
Mhm.
up and running, nothing gets too squeaky.
Yeah,
um,
routine maintenance is no joke. I mean, you
right.
see the difference it makes on your car. Just imagine what it would do if you did it for your body. Mhm.
Exactly. That's another joke I tell my clients. It's like, why do we take better care of our cars than our bodies? We gotta get
Absolutely. Yeah.
um, but yeah, so there's that, just kind of more general, just overall,
Mhm.
how am I doing? And then we have sports specific ones too. So my background in gymnastics, of course, I have a really thorough kind of traditional gymnastics screen and CrossFit gymnastics, but then we also do it by body part if you want us to go a little more in depth. So based on your activity. So we do kind of an overhead shoulder screen, we do a trunk stability and power production screen, and then lower extremity. And you can kind of pick if we want to focus in on one area or the other.
Okay, got it. All right. And then that's great. I think both of those are great. And I think anybody can benefit from them, because the one thing, I mean, I know a lot about movement. I've studied movement for decades. You know a lot about movement, but the one person whose movement I know the least about is mine,
Right.
because I can't see myself move.
Mhm.
I can't
Absolutely.
sit there when I squat down, when I lunge, when I hip hinge. I can't see what's going on. I mean, I can try to
Right.
feel it, but I can't see what's going on. So that's why I think it's even more important for people to have someone take a look at their movement so that they can fix things and cue them. So then you can kind of reprogram that feel in your head. So then you really know what it feels like to move correctly or
Right.
perform the movement correctly to avoid those injuries that can become nagging injuries, and
Right.
chronic injuries. Yeah, absolutely. So where can people find you, get more information, reach out, contact you, all of that good stuff?
Yeah, definitely. So probably the easiest way is going to our website. So it's www.poweredxmovement.com.
Okay.
And so everything on there, there's a link to call me, email me, our address. You can stop by anytime. But I think our website's the easiest. We also have Instagram at Powered X Movement. You can follow us, send us a DM. We're pretty responsive, but everything you need is right on our website and we can get you scheduled.
Great. And those links will be in the show notes. Go to catalyststl.com/podcast and find this episode of the podcast, and the links will be right there. Danielle, thank you very much for coming on the show and taking the time to share your information with us.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'd like to reserve the right to have you back on.
Of course. Anytime. I love it.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Thanks, Danielle. Have a good day.
Thanks. You too.